Instagram is pausing its plan to develop Instagram Kids, a social media platform for children younger than 13. The head of Instagram made the announcement in a blog post earlier today, and the news also comes in light of a report that Instagram led some teenage girls to have mental health issues and some anxiety. To talk more about this, CNET's editor-at-large, Sherr, joins us now. I was just reading a little bit more about all of this and about this study back, what I think it was in 2019, talking about this. So it was some background that was kind of in the background, right, and about launching this social media site for kids.
Yeah, I mean, look, Instagram and Facebook generally are always trying to grow, right? And it's actually rather interesting. We haven't really run across this before. They're starting to run out of people around the world who are going to want to join Facebook. And what they're doing now is trying to find all these other communities that might be trying to join that haven't been able to, including, of course, people under the age of 13. I know a lot of people who lied about their age to be able to get a Facebook or Instagram account because, it just says, hey, what's your birth date? And then if you're under 13, it says you can't join. So people just give the birth date that says 13 or more. And that's been an issue in and of itself because Instagram, of course, is kind of like a magazine in a lot of ways. It's part of what has always helped it succeed is that the kind of beautiful imagery, right? And all of the influencers and their amazing places that they go and things they do, that all gets a ton of attention. But there's also a lot of appears to be amplified negatives of the magazine industry within Instagram as well, which is why we're talking about this and why Facebook is now putting a pause, as they call it, on actually building this out.
I mean, it's always been a bit of the rub, right? With magazines, like you were mentioning, looking at these magazines where, there's these pictures of people that are not really actually really people because they have been digitalized or made, in certain way. They're, for example, their blue eyes are bluer. They're, so how do you weigh in on that? I mean, is this more of a parental issue? Is this, I know that on YouTube, my kids can go and look and see it, the influencers, and they love to follow this family out of Australia that they're absolutely obsessed with. But so is this just Instagram trying to do something good?
I love Australia too, by the way. I don't know what Instagram is thinking at the end of the day. Like, I think that in a lot of ways, they feel tons of pressure from a lot of lawmakers and critics who say, look, you are already causing so much trouble in the world. This series of stories that came from the Wall Street Journal a couple weeks ago that really spoke to a lot of the troubles that Facebook has found internally and made it clear to a lot of us that they are much more aware of the problems that exist in the world of Facebook and Instagram than even they admit to. All of that kind of says, okay, well, if you're aware of these problems, why are you pushing forward on building these services? And, I think on some level, by pausing this, they're at least acknowledging that these concerns exist. I don't know what they're going to do to try and solve it, but it's one of the things about Instagram that even inside Facebook, this research spoke to, is that because Instagram is so image conscious, right, is that it kind of, the computer programs that recommend the next post recommend stuff that becomes popular. And unfortunately, a lot of that popular stuff can be toxic. So I don't know how you solve this, but I do know that there is a real problem with how stuff is being, what they call surfaced, shown to teenagers on the platform, and how it's making them feel.
And also, you have to at least approach this from an adult perspective or a parent perspective. And how do you have those communications or those conversations with someone who's adolescent, who does not have necessarily the maturity or understands that an algorithm is pushing forward, you to see this versus that, et cetera, and so forth. So it's really a dicey dilemma for everyone, right?
I mean, it's a dicey dilemma even for us adults, right? I think that the reality is that we are learning as a society how to really cope with what we've brought into the tech world. And I think that this conversation around the algorithms, right? These computer programs that decide what we look at, this conversation has only been a couple of years old. And really, we haven't come to conclusions around it very much. And so I think part of it is, yes, we need to get a lot better at how we talk about this, the way we approach this stuff. And yes, part of it is on us, but part of it also is on the people who actually maintain this service, right? There is a responsibility that comes with owning the platform. And at the moment, what the problem that I see, at least, and what lawmakers in Capitol Hill have now seized upon, is that it appears Facebook has not been taking the responsibility of managing its platform correctly.
And how do you argue, you know, in the reports that I've read it doesn't seem at all that Facebook really is even interested, from my perspective, in managing that part, other than making the comments today about putting a pause to hear what lawmakers have to say. That was what I was reading earlier, was that the announcement today for that. But I mean, do you have any faith or confidence in regards to them actually putting something in, or safeguards, or a conversation? I mean, there's agencies out there like Common Cause or so forth to have those better conversations with kids, but they're kids, right?
Yeah, look, I was raised by my parents to believe that people wake up every day wanting to make the world better than when they went to sleep, right? And I think that generally speaking, Facebook is trying to do good in the world. I think the challenge here is that up until a couple weeks ago, a lot of us believed that Facebook didn't fully have its hands wrapped around the problem. What we now need to kind of deal with and have these conversations around is that it appears they do understand the problem. They just don't know how to solve it, and they haven't created the institutional will internally to make those changes happen. And that is a larger problem that I think is not only just a problem inside of Facebook, but it's a problem for all of us who continually log on and choose to use it. And that is what is going to be interesting, I think, over the next few weeks, is really not just what is Facebook doing, but how are we responding? Because make no mistake, there is a ton of appetite on Capitol Hill to regulate Facebook, to write new antitrust laws, to take on not just Facebook, but the larger tech industry for a lot of perceived problems, including the issues we're talking about. And if Facebook doesn't really come to address these things, they're going to be forced to one way or another.
Remind me, when was the last time there was the legislation passed? I mean, wasn't that like in 87 or something? When was that?
There hasn't been any serious tech legislation passed. I mean, if you think about it, since I would argue since the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, right, which is before the millennium passed. But most of the antitrust laws we're looking at today were written for oil barons. They were not written for the tech industry. And that is part of what has even come up in lawsuits that are involving Apple, for example, is the judge in Oakland who presided over a trial that Apple was involved with the video game maker Fortnite, said that, look, by the law right now, you did not violate antitrust law. Mm-hmm. But she made clear that there appears to be an argument to be made that there's a problem here in the tech industry. And that is part of why there are more and more calls for something to be done about all of this from the lawmakers.
Okay, so what do we look for? Is this something that's going to happen the next couple of weeks? Is this a pause long term? Is this a 6-month pause? Kind of look into the shiny ball for me and give me a forecast.
Yeah, I think that Facebook ultimately will come out with a version of Instagram for Kids, and not just because they want to grow their customer base. I'm sure they do. I think there's an argument to be made that if kids are joining anyway, let's come up with a way for them to do it responsibly. And I can respect that. I think the challenge is, how do you do this in a responsible way? And the problem is that continuously Facebook has shown us since really the beginning that it is far better at screwing up and apologizing than it is at making the issue better. And that is where it really needs to solve all this for for a lot of us to feel more comfortable with it.
I was going to say, because right now I'm kind of in the hard no category until I see reasons to lean into the other way.
You're not alone.
Very good. Sherr, always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks for having me.